We live in some of the oldest mountains in the world.
Stolen land, stolen again to create the extraction state.
We are real people talking about real things in a real way.
This is Appalachian Livin.
Appalachian Livin is sponsored in part by Wade Law Firm PLLC, Sage Stitch Finance Corporation, representing wisdom and mending what we already have, providing gap funds for resilient renovations.
Welcome to the second episode of Appalachian Livin, Mosaic Mind Production. I am Lindsay, and my co-host is
Elise.
Hello. We have quite a few things we want to talk about. First, we're just going to do some housekeeping. We are now up on quite a bit of podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple. I don't even know all the others. We're trying to get on iHeartRadio. I'm working on that, but almost any of the platforms you can find us. Also, we're on YouTube and all the social media platforms. Appalachian Livin. That's their name all across the board. So just search for us. And like I said, this is our second episode, and clearly people have been watching based on some of the feedback we've been getting. And I just want to reiterate that we are two women who have lives, husbands,
normal people.
Families.
Yeah.
We just have things we want to say. Yeah. And, we don't claim to know everything or to be completely factual. It's all opinions and experiences.
And we're creating a platform to discuss these in real time with real folks. So
we're trying to start conversations.
Right.
We're not trying to start arguments.
No, because regardless of our views, we all have the same common issues as a community.
We like to live,
breathe, and drink clean water.
Right.
But I think it's important to say that, we appreciate the feedback. We've had some really fabulous support and folks sharing our podcast, and the shorts from it are on YouTube. I need Lindsay to talk more in the shorts. Less of me, more of you. But
you're so fabulous and you speak so well.
Well,
and you always put my jibber jabber into something tangible that normal people can probably understand.
Context is really, really important.
It is.
When you talk about issues that are sometimes deeply personal, it's easily manipulated. Information is easily manipulated because you're emotional about those things. But when you contextualize things, it helps take some of that angst out of it. You kind of understand the bigger picture. And I'm speaking from my experience. When I get freaked out about things that are happening, it's really helpful sometimes to zoom back and say, well, how do we get here? What's the background of this particular issue? And in my experience, like I said, I speak only from my observations and, work out in the world, but I have very strong views about certain things. One of those things we're going to talk about today, and how my views were formed by the influence of a particular person. So I'm excited for the feedback.
I can't wait to hear all about it. I'm so excited. I've been waiting to ask you about this. I even messaged you, I think, I don't know, that night or first thing the next one. I was like, I want to hear all about it. And I called you right away, and you're like, you must be excited to hear about it. I was like, yes, I am. I have 5 minutes while I'm making my kids' peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Right. And I appreciate that, because I think, it's a big topic and I'm excited to get into it. But any more housekeeping before we dive in?
I think that's it. I do want to, last episode we had my husband, Tom. So he's our producer, and he will be here just to help us with tech and answer questions. And he's our old Tommy boy.
Such a big help.
I am still here.
Thank you.
He's here.
Yes.
Thank you for all your help.
I
really
I'm
appreciate
just
it.
here for the moral support.
And the tech,
and
the tech.
And I can push buttons pretty good.
He's the tech support.
You make us sound bona fide, as we say.
All right.
Yes.
That's my forte.
So the event that Lindsay was referencing was the addition of the Larry Gibson Biography project to the West WVU Humanities Department. That happened last Thursday. And I'd like to give some background on Larry Gibson, talk a little bit about how I came to know about him and work with him. And then we can talk about kind of the ongoing legacy of his work and people like me who met him as teenagers, and he changed the trajectory of our lives.
I never met the man. And I've heard a lot of things, and I've heard the name Larry Gibson thrown around in various circles. And I remember Elise always talking about him. And I never really understood who he was. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what he looks like. So I'm going to throw some pictures up if we can find some.
There are plenty.
I know you have some. So, I know I'd asked you, where he grew up. He grew up in Kayford, on Kayford Mountain. Now, explain to people where Kayford is. It's in reference to Charleston, West Virginia. Where is it?
Well, as we say, as the crow flies, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 50 miles from Charleston.
Is it south?
Southwest.
Southwest,
A good way to conceptualize it, if you look at a county map of West Virginia, it's where Boone County, Kanawha County, and Raleigh County come together. Mm-hmm. Right there is basically Kayford. And that location and where those counties are is part of the story and the history of why Kayford was so important to these folks, mm-hmm. to the folks who are doing the surface mining up there. So
now it's kind of close to Cabin Creek.
Yes, you actually drive up Cabin Creek Road.
Okay, so now you took us up there about 10 years ago.
Yes,
and I remember going through Cabin Creek, and I know Cabin Creek is a very integral part in the coal mine wars.
Yes.
And we will get into the coal mine wars in another episode, because mm-hmm. we feel like that deserves its own...
Absolutely.
Its own series, almost. But we'll do the best we can with it. But it's really close to that. And so there's so much history in this area that I have chills right now. That's him, right?
Yes.
We're looking at some pictures.
Notoriously famous for his bright yellow, a safety yellow shirt that said, "We are the keepers of the mountains. Love them or leave them. Just don't destroy them. Mm-hmm. If you dare be one too, call." And it had his cell phone number on it. And
he gave his cell phone number.
How
many people would give their cell phone number?
Now, not many. This
public. And what year was this?
I'd say 20 years ago.
He was born in 1946. That's the year that my father was born.
Yep. He was born in 1946, and he grew up as the son of a coal miner. He watched his father bust his body and break his body in the mines, and eventually leave, and tell his sons to do something different. He traveled to Ohio.
We've all heard, right?
Absolutely.
That's
that hillbilly highway out.
Yeah, you got to, go get your college education. You got to get out of here so you can live a better life.
That's right. And so the Biography project really teases out a lot of his early life, and it was a very complex, a very layered, multi-location, very mobile family. He got into lots of shenanigans as a kid because he was a feisty little mountain fella, and had to protect himself and others and deal with life in the streets, mm-hmm. and bigger cities. That again is part of the Biography project. I'll just say briefly that he worked for the auto industry in Ohio for 30 years and retired from there. So he got his proverbial shit together at some point, and made a life for himself, and created a retirement for himself. And his desire was to return to his home place on Kayford Mountain.
Go back down.
And to live out his days there on this beautiful piece of land. And when he returned there and settled in, he could hear explosions in the distance, which not completely unusual around mining, activities, underground or otherwise, but they became more frequent. They were getting closer. And when he learned what was happening, that this method of mining called mountaintop removal, which blasts layers of rock away from thinner layers of coal so that they can scrape those out and get them more easily, he became active with the Citizens Action Group and groups in Charleston, and really became a thorn in their side, I think is the best way to say it. There are stories about him running up long distance phone bills because all he did was sit there in the office and call people and ask them what they're going to do about mountaintop removal, right? So this was his early activism, was to just get big and loud.
What is this picture here? So we're on LarryGibsonBio.com.
Yes.
And there's a picture of him standing in front of the state police. It looks like he's just holding his hands out like, go ahead and arrest me. That's what it looks like. Is he showing them something?
No, he's being arrested. This is one of, I don't know what the description says there, but he was arrested several times in these moments of, creating awareness around mountaintop removal and the dangers around it. He had to put himself in positions to be arrested and removed and things like that. And that's called direct action, and this is something that he taught young organizers and people who came here, that this is how you get attention. Some people have to put their bodies out there and be arrested to make a scene, and so others will look and understand.
There's a price that has to be paid.
So he got very involved, and if you do this work, Lindsay, now you've joined the ranks of organizers in West Virginia.
That's why I have a lawyer as a best friend.
When you beat the drum and you yell and you scream and it feels like nobody's listening, right? And so
it's frustrating.
You don't know what to do. So how I met Larry was he began bringing students from colleges around the area to his mountain, to Kayford Mountain. And back then, the mountain was still intact, and you looked at mountaintop removal coming at you from a distance. You could watch it happening maybe a half a mile away or whatever, and it was so impactful. And I have so much jumbled up in my mind that my mind is skipping around, because now you go to that mountain, and what was there that you looked up at is now gone. You pull into the parking lot and you look around, and there's no mountain to look up at any longer.
So I remember you took us up there in about 2014. No.
That would have been 2016.
2017, something like that. It was right before you had...
I was right. It was 2016, yeah.
And so we went up there, and I remember we got off the interstate, and then we went back, and we drove for a long time.
Yeah, it's very remote.
And we kept driving, and we went up to the top of a mountain, and there was a house. It was a cute little spot with a baby bear. Walked up. I got yes. video and photos of it, and then we walked up a little further, and then all you could see for the view was dead brown mountain valley, blasted out rock.
When they were actively mining that part of Kayford Mountain, Larry called it Hell's Gate, because you literally
said they were like I remember you saying something about rocks would be falling down on them.
Well, if you consider where the high wall is, they had to blast that close to those homes. And yeah, they warn you and put up notices and say, we're going to blast.
But it's your home.
It's right there, right?
It's right at your home. Like we are at my home right now.
And to be clear, nobody lives on Kayford full time, because there is no electricity, there is no water, there is no infrastructure up there. So a lot
Not
of the
anymore,
cabins
or
never
there
was.
wasn't. Okay,
there never was. The irony. Yeah, it's a bit ironic, right, that you live in the middle of a mine that produces coal that's used all over the place for electricity, and then there's no electricity there.
Well, I have to say a story about something similar to that. If you look across the road here, you can look across the road. There used to be a gas well right there.
Oh.
And we never was able to get any of that gas that was being pumped out from underneath us. It was being pumped to other places.
Not uncommon.
And so I don't think a lot of people understand that they take our resources and they ship it out. It doesn't keep our lights on.
Well, and I'm one of the folks that say, if you're in the camp of people who say we should extract and use these resources, what West Virginia has under it, and Kentucky and Virginia, could provide power for thousands of years if we
did it correctly.
Thoughtfully, if we thoughtfully harvested that energy. However, capitalism demands thoughtlessness.
Right.
Capitalism demands a number.
Well, it's whoever is
Formula.
making those policies is going to make it to where it helps them more than it helps anybody else. And not really.
It's a bottom line number. It's really about if whoever's going to get the cheapest, the quickest. And these minerals were purchased 200 years ago. I mean, that's the other thing we have to remember is these were speculators who came in when they, first started settling in these regions, and they saw literally Coal River's called Coal River because the coal was poking out of the mountains in places like there were outcroppings of coal seams visually right there. You'll never leave Harlan alive. Nobody knew there was we knew there was coal here, but nobody knew
what it was worth,
or what it would, or how much of it was there. Because when you can't fathom.
There's that rock. I can burn it, and I'm just going to use that for my own personal heating.
So we need to look into the. Go ahead.
So I think we can add a little bit of Larry Gibson himself.
That's
here
a great video.
If you'd like to.
Please put the closed captions on because he's kind of hard to understand in this one. And
we'll always put closed captions.
They showed this at the presentation the other night and weren't able to get the captions up. So I'm glad we're showing this because this is a fabulous piece.
My family's owned this land for about 235 years now. Before the industry came in here, this land fed over 60-some families. School, general store, the church. Now, it's just me. My ex-wife said, if you stop fighting for the mountains, we'd have a chance. Because in the early years, she was with me. But then the threats became too violent. I've had 123 acts of violence, from shootings to burning of the cabins. The last dog I had, they shot it. That's a bullet hole. Right here, the bullet hole. Up there, right there, over here. I know that one day I'll lose my life doing what I'm doing. They've managed to destroy 2.5 million acres, and I've managed to hold on to 50. 3,000 miles of streams destroyed now. Coal waste been injected in the groundwater. The people I was visiting last night, black water coming out of the faucet. They're scared. I said, then use your anger to get over your fear and get up and change it, because you're the only one that can. Someone tell me why are we being sacrificed? Why are we being called collateral damage? If you're coming for me, you plant your feet, because I ain't going nowhere. I can't set an example for others if I give up. I can't set an example for my own daughter if I give up. The one thing that's cost me more than anything, it's cost me the price of my daughter and my marriage. Of all the beauty I've seen in this state, in the mountains, the most precious thing I've ever seen in my life is my daughter being born. What do you have so precious to your own circle of life that you don't have a price on it? What would it be for you? And what would you do to protect it, and how far would you go? For me, it's a way of life. For me, it's walking through the woods. For me, it's listening to the critters when I'm out there. For me, it's Appalachia. People come to see me, they ask the same question. What drives you? What drives me is I'm right. You know? I'm right.
Oh my God, I wish I could have met that man.
This man was a mountain of a man. He reached into your chest and he grabbed your heart and he led you around his mountain and he told you his story and he put your heart back in your chest and he said, now what are you going to do about it?
LarryGibsonBio.com.
If you don't do something, you wasted my time.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like where he said, if you're coming for me, you better plant your feet.
It resonates when you're from the mountains, don't it?
It sure does, let me tell you.
Yep.
So you can understand why at 19 years old, when this man entered my life and showed me mountains being blown apart, I went to him and said, what can I do? What can I do? I lived on the other side of this county and I didn't know this was happening. I grew up in the same county where this is happening and I didn't know until I went away to college in another state and sat through an Appalachian Studies course my sophomore year. So that was the first what moment around this.
Yeah.
Like, how did I not know this was happening, right? So I went there, I met him, And the Keeper of the Mountains didn't exist then as an organization. He was trying to get something up and running. So I asked what I could do. He said, I need a pamphlet. I need a pamphlet to talk about the park and, what we're trying to do to protect the land here. So I went back to college and I worked up a pamphlet. And I came back. I was like, what else do you need? He's like, I need a ride-on lawnmower. He had a heart condition, and he was push mowing the camp up there at Kayford.
Bless his heart.
So I went back to Blacksburg and had a bake sale and had a garage sale and a car wash. And I raised some money and bought him a ride-on lawnmower, $500 ride-on lawnmower. My dad delivered it with me. That's how he met my dad that one time. One time he met my dad. So then he needed business cards to hand out with his cell phone number on it. So I got some money together to do that. And I worked with him for a couple years. And I went to him after a while and I said, they're not stopping. The business cards and the pamphlets and the lawnmowers and the bake sales and the car washes. It's not stopping them. I'm ready to blow some shit up. I'm ready to chain down to some shit. I'm ready to do some direct action. I'm ready to get handcuffed. And,
yeah, I'm prepared to get arrested.
And Larry was the first person who introduced the concept of privilege.
Right.
To me. We that's a common term now that we hear frequently. It wasn't 25 years ago.
No.
And so when he looked at me and said, well, you seem like a smart girl, which I love that line anyway, in hindsight, like, I'm not going to totally, blow your ego up here and tell you seem like a smart girl. Why don't you use your education and your mind to help this fight instead of your body? Plenty of people can do that. You have an opportunity.
Right.
So I put my sights on public policy grad school in Boulder, Colorado, ironically enough. And I happened to be engaged to someone who came from a family of lawyers and said, why would you waste your time in grad school when you could go an extra year and be a lawyer? I was like, fantastic.
All right.
And so in law school, it's not a senior thesis. It's like it's called a seminar paper. And I did my third year seminar on mountaintop removal, strip mining, and I came back to West Virginia. And I got with Larry, and it was in 2005. And I took pictures on one of the old, box cameras, the disposable cameras. Yeah. And I also must have had a digital camera because I know I put pictures of the current destruction happening on Kayford while I presented my paper. Mm-hmm. And the mountain was still there. You still looked up at it, but they were kind of chewing away at it from the one side. I presented my paper, and they turned up the lights, and there were 10 or 15 people in the room just... And I had prepared a statistic that said basically since I've been talking, this much mountaintop has been blasted or something like that. Right. So my professor took the paper. It was the end of the semester. She got on a plane, and she flew to an environmental law conference in Texas. And she graded the papers on the way there. And she sat down at the conference, and a professor from WVU presented my paper. And she said she sat there the entire time seething. She was convinced I'd plagiarized his paper, and she was going to come back and get me kicked out of law school.
Oh, my God.
And she's telling me this, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I have all my research. I have all my stuff.
I swear. I don't even know this man.
And she said she talked to him after the lecture, and he told her his published dates, and I had turned my paper in and my drafts in before he'd published. So she gave me an A instead. And it was the only A I ever made in law school. But I made it on that paper. I was either going to get kicked out or going to get an A, which turns out the story of my life.
All or nothing with you, is it?
All or nothing, baby. So I knew I was onto something. If 1,200 miles away, I was coming to the same conclusions that the professors at WVU were coming to in their research, right? I wasn't ready to go home, though, and I ended up in post-Katrina New Orleans after law school working for FEMA as an independent housing inspector.
I remember you telling me about this.
So I'm looking forward to the FEMA conversation.
Were you in Katrina?
No,
You just went there after.
Correct. I was living in Houston.
You were there to help.
I was living in Houston. I went there to make money. Be very clear. To work for FEMA, you go there to make money.
Well, listen, we're about honesty here.
And I want to say that. Some people
you have to make money.
You have to make money, exactly. And not everybody can go to a disaster zone and do what needs to be done to get people the resources they need.
It takes special people that have those type of circumstances and skills that are able to do that.
So I want to just say that like when the FEMA conversation happens here locally, I'm willing to be part of that, and also to reach out to people who currently work in FEMA, because I know from my end what it looked like on the ground. But I wound up in Colorado after that, where I got to live out my public policy and advocacy dream. I became a lobbyist at the state level, and I worked on really some controversial issues, and state tuition for undocumented students. You know, we did some policy work on that and why that's a good thing for us. And payday lending was another big issue that I got to work on, education issues. So I got to cut my policy chops in Colorado.
But you also got to see how that side works.
Exactly. And at one point, that's exactly what happened.
And I would really like to talk about that one day, because I got to tell you, I'm not about, I don't like lobbyists.
Right.
And I think that they're a detriment to our government, and I still love you.
Well, and I think that, you know, I would use the example of a mechanic in a car, and I would say, everyone says, you know, my dad would say that if an engine's broken, you got to take it apart, right? You have to take it apart and see which part's broken and fix that part and put it back together. Well, when we stand outside that Capitol building and say it's broken, it's broken, it's broken. Well, what's broken?
Right.
How is it broken?
Well, you got to have answers. You got to have a plan and a way to fix it. Right. And I understand that.
So you got to get in there and look at the mechanics of it and see the nuts and bolts of it. And what I learned was where there were advocacy points for normal citizens to come in and talk. So then you teach them that. You bring leaders in who want to talk on the issue and say here and how and what. And here's a handful of talking points that you create beforehand. Why is it important to you?
Yeah.
What of these things matter to you? Tell your story. And I got to help put together a booklet of healthcare stories for Senator Michael Bennett, who's still in the Senate. I worked very closely with him on healthcare reform back in the day. And so when I see him on TV these days, I'm like, I know him, you know. So I sat down one night, though, in Colorado and realized that what I was learning was the missing piece.
Yes.
That was the missing piece in West Virginia. And I was like, I need to bring this knowledge and these skills back to that fight. Meanwhile, Larry Gibson was killing it here.
Fighting for his life and his land.
Building a coalition of powerful people who marched on Blair Mountain and reminded the entire country what Blair Mountain is and why it's important. And we have our red bandanas here for our redneck army. Again, the mine wars and that whole period in history, which was about 100 years ago, right at 100 years ago, framed how workers became protected throughout, you know, the Industrial Revolution. And it's an important part of our history. It's why we don't have children in factories. It's why we're going to unpack Mother Jones and her activism and her influence on these mountains. But when I realized that, you know, Larry was working so diligently and so hard and had grown so much, when I did make the move back to West Virginia, not too long after that in 2011, I got back in touch with him the following year, and we met. We met down on the interstate, and I rode up the mountain with him. And how I can describe it is, we were like rough cut, like rough cut gems before like rough stones, right? Like we came together and we're like, we don't know what we're doing, but we got to do something, right?
We're just rocking it.
And 10 years later, we came back together, and when we saw each other, we just looked each other up and down like, well, you're looking good. You're looking good, too.
Finally polished.
Looking polished. Let's go. And I think what he said to me, he'd asked me to come on as a fundraiser, and he said, I think I could raise a lot of money standing next to you. And I said, I bet we could, you know. So he takes me to the mountain, and I get out of the car, and I turn around, and the mountain that you always looked up at when you got out of the parking lot was gone.
Right.
And I burst into tears. And I said, I knew it would be, right? Because I knew they were taking it down. We knew what was happening, but
actually seeing it.
When you turn around in the mountain that's always been there is not there anymore. It's a really, really impactful feeling.
Right.
And so he showed me around the mountain, and he asked me if I wanted to come work for him, and I said, absolutely. And I sent my resume in, and I called him, and I told him. And that was on a Wednesday night that we talked, and he passed away the following Sunday.
From what?
Heart attack, heart problems up on the mountain. He was working, mowing, clearing brush, doing whatever he did to take care of his beloved Kayford, and his heart gave out on him. And so...
But you got to see him right before
I did. I saw him like maybe a month and a half before that. So the problem was he hadn't introduced me to anybody. Like 2 people knew who I was. So when he passed and I stepped in, there was a lot of suspicion.
You had to prove your worth. You had to prove yourself again.
I was a lawyer from Colorado as far as anybody else was concerned, right? Like, who is this chick? What infiltrating crazy woman is this? I got to work with the foundation. I ended up moving into the executive director position, and I did 50 plus tours the first year on Kayford. And when people would go with me there and see that I learned from Larry how to tell the story and talk about it, then they understood that I did have some credibility. And then...
Well, you were doing it just as much justice.
He taught me.
Right.
He taught me how to do it. So there were lots of folks. I'd say probably 10,000 people over the course of the years is not a small number of people who have gone there. You know, we know thousands went that were documented. We don't know how many went just to see it on their own and didn't actually sign a paper or anything. But his ongoing legacy, you know, 20 years later, we're building out into regional networks. People who sat on Kayford and talked over campfires now have 13 years of history and 4 states of people talking about important issues.
He passed away in 2012.
Yes.
What month?
September. Yep. It was beginning of September. His memorial service was hours and hours and hours.
That was the year we came back from Florida.
Isn't that interesting? We all kind of came back and converged about the same time.
And then I met you...
in 2013.
Was it 2013?
It was 2013. And so, yes, it was... Larry Gibson really impacted the people who came in contact with him. And I consider myself extremely fortunate to have known him before he was in the nonprofit, because I felt like understanding coming from nothing into what he built.
Right.
Knowing that you can, just a handful of people who really care can make a big difference.
Yes.
And now Kayford stands protected. There's a park, there's a family trust, there's all kinds of layers of protection on that land. It's a bit of an island in the middle of a sea.
Like they told him.
Yep.
It would be.
One of the co-executives at some point, when they offered him multiple times to buy the property and to buy the minerals and big amounts of money to move him out of there, which he always turned down, and we'll talk about his famous quote in a second. They told him, one day you'll be an island. And will be the ocean around you, and now you stand on that island.
That is when. That's July 29th.
Who is that man? That looks like your son.
2016.
That looks like Ricky standing there.
Yeah, I was probably 285 right there.
Yeah.
I remember that day. It was a great day to see, because
it was a beautiful day.
Sometimes you get up there and it's a little, we live in a rainforest.
Yeah.
This is the second most biologically diverse rainforest in the world, and it's hard to see sometimes, but you all got some fantastic pictures.
Yeah, I wish we hadn't lost the video. It really makes me sad, but we did
You captured
preserve some pictures.
And now the mountain
Look
across
at those
there,
photos.
there we are. That mountain across there is what's being taken down now. So that's Coal River Mountain in the background across the valley. And so, it's the mountain's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's the reverse view.
Yeah, so
and these mountains back here are being taken down now.
Yeah, currently. We could take a drone up now and look across the river, and you would see active mining.
We're gonna try to schedule a time
that
we can go up there and drone it.
Great.
One of the things that really hit me when we were up there was the fact that you said that all of these mountains were taller than Kayford by thousands of feet.
Well, I'd say several hundred.
Yeah.
Several hundred feet.
Kayford was not the peak, and it wasn't the overlook
Correct.
Right. That it is now.
that, yeah,
You
right.
'Cause
literally looked up around
stand,
you.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
stand here, everything is below you. Everything that they had taken the tops of the mountains.
Right.
Right. So
And if you can imagine the ledge that we're standing on there, at one point was a sheer high wall right up against where we're standing. And because Larry's land went right up to that and he would take people there, the coal company had to, create a space that wasn't a sheer cliff.
Right.
But that is not a safe or sound, that's not been built to be walked on or anything done with it, right? So
Yeah.
we always have to warn people when you go up there and look around, be careful because it's dangerous. There also, if you can imagine a mountain being intact and you take away this side of it, it will start to pull apart itself.
Of course.
And we see that on Kayford now where there are these huge mine cracks where the mountain itself is actually kind of falling to the
It'll
side.
eventually just kind of fall apart and
Correct.
go into the valley.
Correct.
yeah, we had to watch Ricky very carefully. As you can see in some of these, he's sitting,
Right.
and
He was 9,
he's sitting there.
10.
He was. He's still a little, shaky on his feet, but we had to really watch him here because it's steeper than it looks in these photos.
Yeah.
Right
And
here.
it's not as stable as it looks either. Or flat.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
The reality is,
I mean, you could roll right down there.
Yeah, they did things to make it more safe right there because Larry brought so many people here. Now, I had the opportunity one time when I worked with Keeper of the Mountains to go onto the mine site itself and tour it with the DEP, the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. When you go down onto the site and look back up at the mountain, you cannot tell where that high wall is. Like it's literally invisible. You'd think it would be very obvious when you stand up there and look down, but it's not when you're down there looking back up. And that was a very telling moment. I don't know who they thought I was, but when they found out who I was, they were done showing me around and took me back to the car. Because I was standing under Kayford Mountain and we were looking at a map and there were these boxes on it, pink boxes. And I said, well, what are those? And they said, that's where that's topsoil storage. And I was like, well, where's it at? Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, well, you can't store all the topsoil off the strip mine. And I was like, well, why not? And he picks up a gravel and he says, this gravel has a certain surface area, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, if you blast it apart, it creates a lot more surface area, right? And I was like, yeah. He said, yeah, so you can't, what would cover one surface wouldn't cover the other. And that was the explanation for why they weren't saving the topsoil, because there wouldn't be enough to cover what they exposed. It wasn't a valid
I'm sorry,
explanation.
I'm still confused by that.
You should be, because
I would
there was
I have
no
further questions.
It was nonsensical.
And I don't think you have the answers to that.
But when I got to the specifics of that, that's when they were like, wait, who are you and where are you from? Who are you with?
Young lady, you're
supposed to
asking
be
a
in
lot of
awe.
questions.
You're supposed to be in awe of this strip mine, and you are asking very detailed questions.
Young lady,
right?
you shouldn't be asking questions like that. You should just let us do whatever we want.
Don't be thinking, right? So I appreciate you giving me the space and the opportunity to talk about this really important person in my life who, the Keeper of the Mountains Foundation has not gone on in its current form, because what I realized after Larry passed is there were people who were super loyal to the movement, and there were people who were super loyal to Larry.
Right.
And without Larry's constant engagement,
They
they
fall
didn't.
off.
Yeah, they fell off. And so it changed the dynamic, and the loss was so profound.
Yeah.
It was such a profound
Well,
loss.
it's a heartbreaking thing, and it probably took a lot of people.
A minute to to
and everybody
process it.
grieves in their own way. And I know from my own experience that when you're left alone and you know that all these things are happening and you're like, I want to do something, but you have to have somebody there to be like,
Right.
yes, I'm here with you. Let's do this.
And so that's what an organizer does. And I think it's really important that you're pulling this out, because a lot of people hear that word and they don't understand what a good organizer, as I was trained by the people in Colorado, It's now called Together Colorado, but the organization then was Metro Organizations for People, and they trained in an old Alinsky style modeling, which is when a community is in need, you go in and you find out what the need is.
Right.
And then the people who are willing to work on it, you provide support for them. You provide resources. You provide networking. You provide this stuff for them. You don't go into a community and tell them what they're going to work on.
Right.
You don't go into a community and say, here's what I'm going to do for you.
Right.
You say, what do you need? And then you help them learn how to advocate for themselves. And then you step back and you watch them rock and roll, right?
Yeah, let them do it.
That's
Yeah.
the best part of organizing, is when leaders take what you give them and roll with it and get things done, right? So as an organizer, he was incredible. He stayed on the phone constantly. The man stayed on the phone constantly. He talked on the phone all the time to everybody. He called constantly. Since I've gone off social media, I've done a lot more phone calls. I talk to you a lot more often.
Right.
I talk to Gail a lot more often.
Right.
I understand the importance of that relationship. Power is in the relationship. That's why Alinsky organizing models look at one-on-ones. You sit down one-on-one with members of your community and you talk to them and you find out, like, everybody has a different take and a different perspective on this thing, right?
And everybody has different skills.
Different skills, different desires,
Abilities.
different motivations,
Right.
different understandings, different networks, different resources. So a good organizer organizes all of that into a campaign or a
And it's not
project,
easy.
right? It's
not easy.
extremely difficult work. It's not well paid. I know we talk about paid organizers and we throw that around but I'd like to say,
I don't really know any.
I want to know where we go get those checks. I do.
Can somebody please message me and let
Where we
me
get the
know
paid
where the
organizer
paid
checks.
organizers go to apply? Thank you.
Okay, so I've got a quick question. Like, what is going on with Keepers of the Mountain now, and how can people be involved with this organization and move it forward?
So I haven't been in touch with any of the folks really who are on the board now for Keepers. I believe there's still an organization. I don't know what format they're operating in. I know that the Coal River Mountain Watch organization in Boone County, in Naoma, in Boone County, is probably the best on-the-ground organization to talk to about actual work. They are currently working on the permits that are happening on Coal River Mountain.
Because they are where Kayford was 10, 15 years ago. Pretty much.
20
some
30.
They are
Yeah.
where Kayford was,
Yes.
and now they're coming after Coal Mountain. And
Correct.
so that's why Coal Mountain Watch is.
Absolutely. And Junior Walk is one of the organizers there. So if folks are interested in that, that's certainly an organization who still does local work.
Can you Google Coal Mountain Watch?
And I will say that the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition was another organization that was deeply involved in mountaintop removal work. They have since dissolved. There are a number of organizations who have worked on it over the years, but there is no real, what the environmental nonprofit scene looked like 15 years ago has changed drastically in West Virginia.
Everything's changed drastically.
Everything's changed drastically. And I want to say that I think this podcast is part of that, right? Like,
I think it is too.
this is a way to still address those issues and still let folks know what's happening without the
start a
formal
conversation.
organization. Right, exactly. Yeah. Like, how do we do better?
Right.
Because sometimes nonprofits are, I don't know the word for it. I've dealt with them. I've worked with them. I've run them. They're never easy. They're always very complex. And it's, again, people join things for different reasons.
Right.
But the reality is all the people that are kind of the trainees of keepers, like all the keepers of the mountains that Larry and others trained, we've gone out into the world and we're doing all these other things. So when you say what's the keepers look like now, like as a formal organization, I'd say it's probably not as visible or as active as before. But if you look at kind of the non-formal aspect of its
The heart
reach,
of it.
it's
The soul of it.
It's big and broad and alive.
I think what Larry has done, and I feel like it's almost like he started here with Kayford. Yes, it's an island, but he saved it.
Exactly. We have a place.
He saved it.
There's a place to go, right?
There's a place to go, and he inspired so many people. And when he passed, I think it just kind of, he spread out. And
Right.
I never met this man. I never met him. I get chills when you talk about him. And there have been a couple of times I don't even remember what it was. Something happened that I felt like his presence was there when we were talking about this podcast and getting it going. And it was almost like he was saying, go, go, do it,
Yeah.
do it.
I've had exactly one dream about Larry.
Really?
I've had one dream about Larry, and in this dream, I walked into like this kitchen area, and there was like a bench area and stoves, and it was a country kitchen, like an old-timey country kitchen, right, with pans hanging from the ceiling. And Larry was standing there with an apron and his yellow hat, stirring a pot. Right? He's stirring a pot.
Stirring
and
a pot.
He sees me as I come in the door, and he's like, "Hey, I'm finishing this up. Come on in and have a seat." And I go in and I sit down, and he puts down what he's doing, and he comes around and sits down and talks to me. That's all I remember. But, he's in the kitchen.
Stirring the
Stirring
pot.
the pot.
He's just finished stirring the pot, and he's coming to tell
Coming
you.
to task me with something, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm delighted that the West Virginia Department of Humanities is housing the Biography project. If people have pictures or videos or anything that they'd like to contribute, they've said that they're open to accept those.
And can they just go on the website, the LarryGibsonBio.com?
I think they're to get
'Cause
the
there's
contact
probably-
information for
yeah.
the Humanities
And
project.
there's videos there if you want to learn about him. And it tells you who is doing the biography and probably how you can get Larry Gibson Biography Project. Is,
He was just a fascinating fellow who lived a really fascinating life and impacted a lot of people. You know, internationally too, just before he died, he traveled to Ecuador to work with communities down there who were dealing with extraction of the oil, Shell oil and you know, Exxon Mobil and all those companies that are working down there. So I think
There's our girl right there.
yeah.
there I am.
Builders for Larry Gibson Legacy Projects.
Like I said, I got to type some of the early transcripts and when they started working on the interviews, because this project's been going on for 15 years. And Alan Johnson and Owen Owens, who is now deceased, Mary Beth and Alan were there the other night. And Alan's also one of my dear friends. He, bless his heart, he always tells me I should be in toothpaste commercials.
Because you have such a pretty smile.
He's like, I swear, you have a pretty smile. But Alan was a real instigator in keeping us all focused and keeping us on task for this, so that was important. Maria Gano is a big part of Larry's legacy too. Judy Bonds, Chuck Nelson. There are so many people that fill out into these communities that we should and always should mention, but both Chuck and Judy are gone. Maria's still with us. I hope Maria Gano can join us
I'm hoping
because
she'll come on sometime.
she's such a national treasure.
We're in contact with her.
She is one of the people who inspires me to be strong and stand on your truth. Larry, you heard him say in that video, I'm not afraid because I know I'm right.
I know I'm right. And I have felt that
Yes.
many times in my life.
I lack the steel. That's what we were talking about earlier, is that my voice may quiver. I don't have that steel in me. But when Larry would meet you and he'd say that, what is the one thing that is so precious to you that you'd never sell it? And find that thing and understand that feeling. And then take that into the fight, right? Like, it doesn't matter what happens, that never leaves me.
Right.
And he also, everybody who spoke the other night at this event said, he taught me I am somebody.
Right.
I am not collateral damage. You don't get to kill me because you want to mine coal. You don't get to roll over my land and my cemetery and my family.
And I'm not going to do it quietly.
I'm not going to do it quietly. And that's where you and you resonate so deeply with me, because you're like that. I am somebody. My son is somebody. My husband's somebody. My dad's extra somebody.
Absolutely.
And so, like, you carry that innately in yourself. And when I find people like that, I'm attracted to them, because those are the people who know themselves. They know what's important. They fight for the things that are important, and they will fight for you.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, I've watched you stand up and fight for people who don't want you to fight for them. They're like, leave me alone. Don't. You're like, but you need water. You need clean water. Take a water.
Water is life.
So you are in the company of a long line of people who feel this way.
And I knew, and I was waiting for you, and I was asking around for you. I was like, Laura, where is Elise? Where is she? And then I get this phone call, and I didn't answer it.
Save the Endangered Hillbilly. It's one of the Coal River Mountain Watch T-shirts that I own.
I want one.
Yeah,
It's
I need
fabulous.
one of those.
You all need
Could
one.
I please? And yes.
Yes, you need a Save the Endangered Hillbilly T-shirt for Coal River
I bet
Mountain
we
Watch.
could donate and get that.
Yes,
right?
I can make that happen in April. So I want to wrap up this conversation on Larry Gibson again. Thank you so much for.
Thank you for talking about him, because like I said, I've heard a little from here and there.
Yeah, and I think his story is much bigger than what I've presented here, and it's very worth looking into. I think I'd like to just conclude by saying one of the things I inherited when I took over at Keepers was this network of professors and students and people who had already come to Kayford, and professors who were working with Larry to go back and forth, right? And Larry went on the road. He went to colleges to present presentations on mountaintop removal. And one of the professors actually has a fabulous story. I'd love to get her on here and talk about it one time. She and her students got run off of Kayford Mountain by some angry miners one time and drove all through the night back to Baltimore. So we have a little drama there, right? But she and I
Get off my land.
It was something like that. She and I sat around a campfire up on Kayford one night and said, what would it look like to have students from all over the region, from Maryland and Ohio and Virginia and West Virginia, and organizers and leaders who all talked together about these issues? And that was 13 years ago. And in that time, we have built that thing. Mm-hmm. And so the first weekend in April, we're actually having folks from those 4 states join us on a tour to look at some of the petrochemical build out on the Ohio River and the Kanawha River, and then to go back in history and really dig back in time and look at the mining, look at some current mining. We're going to go drive through Welch and Mullins and look at some of the impacts of recent flooding.
And we're going to be covering all that.
Yeah. And
it's going to be around the first
weekend
of April, I think, something like that. So,
it's my birthday.
Yeah, it's
a
around
good
Tom's birthday
present.
too.
Mine too.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. Yeah. It's a great time. April birthdays are the best. So we'll just go there.
And I just want to bring some attention to this. If you're wanting to be involved and give back to this cause, the Coal River Mountain Watch currently is taking donations because they need to replace a beaten down old truck so they can go out and do the work that is vital.
And we will try to put that link in comments or somewhere. I'm going to start working on a website, Linktree.
Yay.
That we're going to start having all these resources. So if you hear something on our episode and you want to look into it further, we'll have at least their Facebook page or their donation link or something.
Absolutely.
So be on the lookout for that. We're just growing. It's just me and Elise and a friend of ours that went in on some equipment, and we are in my kitchen. So we would really love to be able to do a lot more.
Sure.
And make this even better. So.
A lot of good has come from Appalachian women hanging out in the kitchen.
I would say, I would have to agree.
Yeah.
So
a lot of shenanigans happening.
A lot of stuff you need to watch out for. Nope.
Which I'll tease this for the Mine Wars episode. I'll tease this for the Mine Wars episode that aprons in particular have significance in the coal fields and in the union efforts and in the mine wars.
Things like that.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my goodness, I can't wait.
I can't wait either. It's going to be very exciting.
I know that the Masons wear aprons in their ceremonial deals. I come from a long line of Masons. I am not one myself, so I don't really know, but I have been involved in Mason funerals, and
they wear the garb,
and they wear a white apron.
Yeah, I think aprons are, when you think about let's just say a mother's apron, holds things in its pockets, it wipes tears, it cleans cuts, it, the lore around some of these very simple objects and the magnificent roles they played in the mine wars and in union organizing and stuff is really a great story. And
I think it's something that we need to remember too.
Absolutely.
Because, we have these mine war museums and, we know our history for the most part, but I think a lot of it is getting forgotten. And I think the message and the feeling, and I think it's being misconstrued, and I think we need to bring it back.
And I think knowing what it is. Mm-hmm. So another thing I'd like to see us do in this podcast is talk about vocabulary and how we define things, because I may be using a word and you're using a word and we're thinking about two completely different things. And so what is a good job? What is a small business? Mm-hmm. What is, and so for later conversations, let's think about words and how we use them and what they mean.
And I definitely need that, because I have a problem with words. I have a problem with finding the right word at the right time when I'm trying to speak. And sometimes it might come across as I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just that that's the first word that comes to my head.
I think you do all right.
Thank you.
I think you do okay.
I don't know if I even said it on here, but I had breast cancer 3 years ago. 3 years ago this week, I was dealing with a breast cancer diagnosis. I was just trying to deal with the fact that, because I didn't know anything about it, I knew it was stage 1, and they're like, oh yeah, it's fine. But no, it's not fine when you get diagnosed with cancer at 41. And so I still take medication. I went through chemo, radiation, and what they call is chemo brain. And the medication that I take also affects my memory and the way things work. So if it takes me a while to come to a word, or if I explain a million words to get to one word, sometimes Elise and Tom can help me because they know what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And you're so gracious in that you understand we're not doing it out of anything other than just support. And
help me here.
I just want to say, kick ass. 3 years ago, we watched that journey online. We watched you get your diagnosis and then get very, very committed to getting well.
I had to.
You have to take care of your son.
Yeah. I mean, we don't give up around here. I don't know why people think that we should just lay down and give up. But no matter what fight you face, you get up and fight.
Mm-hmm.
And like Larry Gibson said, if you come for me, you better set your feet.
You plant your feet.
Plant your feet, buddy.
Yep.
I believe
Cancer
that.
Cancer or otherwise.
Cancer
right?
or otherwise. That's right. You planted your feet. You said your piece.
I ain't afraid because I'm right.
You kicked its ass.
Love you.
I love you too.
So with that, we're gonna end that, and
I think it's a good place.
Yeah. Thank you guys, and we'll be back some other day.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.